Hi everybody, this is David King from Ambrosia Vapes, and I'm going to show you how to rebuild a standard MT3S or EVOD coil. Help you save some money. If you're like me and a heavy vapor, you go through quite a bit of these in a real short period of time. So I discovered how to rebuild these and save yourself some money. This is a factory coil, hasn't even been used yet. First thing you're going to want to do is remove the old silica wick. Good thing to do is run it under some hot water, rinse out all the juice. But you can get some jeweler's pliers. They have no teeth on them, so they're good for gripping strings or the canthal wire, which is your resistance wire. Pull the silica wick out. It'll come out in a couple different pieces. There's actually two strands inside there. So now there's no silica wick left in there. The only thing inside there is your coil. Next thing you're going to want to do is pull out this bottom piece. This is your positive terminal, and it's just a friction fit inside a rubber grommet. So you pull that out, set it aside, and now you want to grip the rubber grommet inside there with your fingertips, or you can use some tweezers. Here is the factory wound coil. You'll notice how small a gauge that wire is. One thing I did discover in my experimentation with rebuildable atomizers is you're less likely to burn up the coil, or they last longer, if you use a thicker gauge wire. So I recommend 30 gauge canthal wire, which is available on eBay. Another thing you're going to need to pick up is a 51 or 52 size drill bit. It's a machinist size, so it's just a single number. This here is a 52 drill bit. Next thing you need to do is, once that coil's out of there, put the drill bit through the coil. And this is an important step. You have to have something through there when you go to pop this top off. It took me a few times to figure this out, but if you don't, you'll snap this top right off, and then you need to either replace it or throw the coil away. So now with a pinching motion, you apply pressure between these 2 points, and then the top just comes right off. No breaking. Your next step is take your canthal wire. This is 30 gauge canthal. You can get it on eBay or Amazon. Thread on that rubber grommet. Run it down the wire. And then take your base with the threads on it. Thread that on the wire. It has to be in that order, otherwise it won't work. Okay, now your next step is to wind your actual coil. I run around between 2.5 and 3 ohms, and for that, because you're not using just regular wire, this entire thing is made out of resistance wire. It'll vary a little bit depending on how far away from the base your coil ends up sitting when you're done, but I use 9 to 10 wraps around this size drill bit. And so you want to start by leaving yourself a little straight tail, and then start winding. And you want these as uniform as you can get and as close together as you can get without touching. So there's 2 wraps, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, we'll go 10. Okay, there's 10 wraps. Okay, and you'll notice it's quite spread out. You don't want that because it won't fit inside your coil base. So spin the drill bit out and you can actually squish that coil together. Yeah. Reshape it. And then you can thread your drill bit back in there. Kind of reshape it again. There. Nice and uniform. Now, you bring your base that you already threaded up, threaded through the wire, bring that up. And then you lay that drill bit right across there. And hold that on there. Now you can see you have two little wires sticking out of the bottom. We'll trim the excess off later. Now run your rubber grommet back up. And this part takes a little finesse. One thing that can help is if you take your pliers and grip the short tail, pull it off to the side and apply a little pressure. That'll put a nice little uniform bend in there. This is your negative side of your coil. Okay, push this little grommet inside there. That'll take a little bit of finesse. Figure out how to get these in there. There. Now you got to make sure you have one piece of wire sticking out of the center of the grommet and one piece of wire sticking on the outside. And that way you don't create a short. So now give that a little tug to snug everything up inside there. Pull it off to the side. Now we take that very small center post that we originally pulled out of there and put that back into the center, and that'll snug everything up. Push it about halfway in, and now that gives us room to get the scissors in there and snip off the excess wire. And then you can snip off on the outside. And if you get a little bit sticking out, it's alright, just kind of push it with your scissors. Okay, so now we're almost done. Got a wound coil in a base. Now comes the fun part, and this can take a little finesse, and that's getting the silica wick back inside the coil. It's 2mm silica wick. You can get that on eBay too. One thing I've discovered is it helps if this starts fraying on you. It gets too bad, you just got to cut the tip off. But get it wet with some water, and kind of, it's just like threading a needle. Get it wet and then work it into a point with your fingers. Now the trick to getting this inside this is turning it. You have to thread it in. Yeah, it's already starting to fray. So let me get this wet. The shape of this, or the way they wind the silica wick, as you turn it, it tightens up and actually reduces the diameter. And it can actually, I'm trying to hold it so you can see it, means I can't see it. As you turn it, it'll actually, the loose strands can actually start winding into the different layers of the coil. Now I gotta re-wet this. and it's like threading a screw. It'll actually wind itself in. Yep, gonna have to cut it. Now, cutting the silica wick is interesting because it's actually glass, so it doesn't like to cut real well. It always helps to hold it real tight close to your scissors when you cut it. Otherwise it'll actually roll right out there and you end up with a very uneven cut. Okay, let's try this again. Of course my shaking hands are not helping. Oops, dropped it. Started on thread. This can take some practice to get used to where to put your fingers to keep things from falling apart on you halfway. There we go, now we're through. Okay, just keep turning it to get until all those loose strands work themselves through the turns of the coil and pop out the other side. Once you're all the way through, pull it, get everything nice and smooth, and pull it back until you're about even with that outer lip. See, now we're through the coil. Okay, now you cut off the excess. Hold your fingers as close as you can in between the coil, or on the edge of the coil, just enough to get your scissors in there to cut that. Because you want a nice smooth cut. Okay. There's our first layer. And these coils have two pieces, one inside the coil and one on, two pieces of silica wick. One inside the coil, and then the next one we're just going to lay across the top there. So I'll cut a small piece right here. Okay, and just lay that across the top, nice and even. Now you're ready to put that top back on with your rubber grommet. Now you can do it by hand, or if it hurts your fingers, what I do is I push that rubber grommet up and grip it with my pliers like this, and then you just push this against the table and squeeze it back together. So now it's all back together. Push that rubber grommet down and that'll seal it. And trim off any little excess you have. Now, one thing I do recommend you do, you don't necessarily have to do it every time, but every so often when you're rebuilding these, is sanitize them. Take them all apart and get some quaternary ammonia sanitizer or equivalent. Give these pieces a soak and let them dry. I'll sanitize them, get rid of any bacteria or germs or anything on them. Okay, so now we've completely rebuilt this coil. We just need to test it before we use it. My voltmeter's battery is dead, so I'm going to put it in my EVOD and hold that on there, and 2.1 ohms. So it's a little low on the resistance, but it would work, not a problem at all. You can add more or less turns to adjust your ohms. You can also use different gauge wire. I did find that the larger gauge, this 30 gauge canthal, works better than the smaller gauge. My theory is the larger surface area disperses the heat better, so you're less likely to caramelize any sweeteners in your juice and burn them up at a slower rate. So may or may not be the case, but that's just my experience. The thicker wire seems to last longer. I've actually had some of my rebuilt coils last longer than factory coils, and I personally attribute it to this thicker wire. So it can take some practice to get the dexterity down in your fingers, a little bit of practice, but it can save you some money if you go through these quite frequently. So just to recap, some things you'll need is a 51 or a 52 drill bit from a machinist drill bit set, 2mm silica wick, some 30 gauge canthal wire, canthal A1, that's the resistance wire. You can do 31 or 32 gauge, I don't have it here in front of me, but I think that's the number. It's a thinner gauge, but like I said, this thicker 30 seems to work the best. Some watchmaker's pliers, they have no teeth on them, so you can grip the wire real good, pull it taut. Some snips or scissors. Some other things that I didn't end up needing but can help, some real fine tip tweezers. If once you get the coil inside the base and you need to readjust it for evenness, these can help. And then a way to test the resistance, either a mod or a ohm meter will do. One thing I didn't do here, but I do recommend, is torch your silica wick with a blowtorch. That'll sterilize it, clean it up. You'll notice it'll glow white, and that's how you know you've heated it up enough, and that'll clean it up real good for you. So this has been my presentation on how to rebuild your MTS3 or your EVOD coils. I'm David King from Ambrosia Baits.